What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Let's Talk Movies. I'm Brad.
Not Miguel.
And tonight we have got a potential Resident Evil update that could be good, bad, and or ugly, depending on how much you liked Welcome to Raccoon City, which we were kind of lukewarm on it. I've only seen it once. I guess I would have to rewatch it again to get like a current,
A better
more up to
grasp of
date
it.
grasp on it. But my first viewing, I wasn't really super stoked on it. And
I'd say
I'm
very lukewarm, right?
yeah,
That's kind of how we felt about it.
I'm a big Resident Evil fan, and I've always loved that series, and I owe that series a lot. I owe being a horror fan to that series because of how much I played the games when I was a kid, and kind of like what it meant to me and my dad and things like that. But this update is kind of frustrating because this kind of ties into the big issue I've had with Resident Evil in terms of movies and TV since the Paul W.S. Anderson stuff, in that I feel like we can't get Resident Evil right. There's so much lore there, and there's so much rich story with such rich characters there, but it always seems like we're just wanting to jump the gun and get to something else. And with this potential update, while nothing is set in stone, it appears that we're kind of falling back into that same trap. Now, this
Hmm.
update comes from Giant Freaking Robot, which I know a lot of times kind of stirs up the leaker culture and the industry insider conversation, which I know people get kind of bent out of shape about. But this is just to talk about the potential news. This is not to comment on Giant Freaking Robot as sources or as insiders and on that whole thing. That is a whole other show in and of itself. We've talked about doing a show for a long time, a live show, um, about the whole leaker culture thing and about industry insiders and whether or not studios purposely leak things to people and leak misinformation, accurate information, all that stuff. Like that's a whole conversation in and of itself.
And that's
But
not something particularly I enjoy doing, honestly. It's just over
yeah,
here swapping
yeah,
swapping insider leaks like a CDs. This is not my thing, man. I go into these movies for protection, so
yeah. I used to be more okay with it than I am now. I don't know why. For a while, I was kind of like, "Ooh, this is interesting." Like, especially with the Avengers stuff, like when Endgame was coming out with the No Way Home, which I know No Way Home was a little bit different too, because there was kind of a hunch from the beginning that it was going to be a multiverse thing.
hmm
But that's a whole thing in and of itself. This specific update, though, is about Resident Evil 4, which is one of my personal favorite video games, if not my favorite video game of all time. That game and that story means a lot to me. That was my bridge into horror as a kid. Was playing through Resident Evil 4 with my dad. I have such fond memories of that game, and this update also comes to us less than 2 weeks, I think, until the remake of Resident Evil 4 hits shelves and officially releases, which is kind of cool too. But as I pull up this article here, let me see. Boom. Exclusive from Giant Freaking Robot, Resident Evil reboot movie based on the best game in the works. A new Resident Evil movie will be based on the acclaimed fourth game and focus on Leon Kennedy. Miguel, real quick, what were your thoughts on Avon Jogia? I don't know how you say his name. I've
it's a dude
never
from
known how to say
Victorious.
his. I know, but I've
I
never known
watched
how to say his
Victorious.
name. I did not watch Victorious, but how do you say his
I was a
name?
kid.
Fill me in then, Miguel, because I don't know.
Wait, let me read his name real quick. What is his name?
Avon Gogia, or not? Or Jogia. I'm tired. Listen,
Avon
I have a newborn. I'm
Jogia.
tired. Jogia,
That's
is
what
it
you're getting for me.
Avon Jogia? I think it's Jogia. We'll see.
I'm
But
not gonna make fun of someone's name, but I mean that's all you getting for me, dog. Sorry.
But as we think about Welcome to Raccoon City, what we just got this last year, what were your thoughts on Leon in that adaptation?
I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really a fan, but I can see why they would want to go in that direction because everything just wants to be, no matter how dreary and dreadful a movie can be, there's always some sort of comedic element you want to have, which is, I guess, a new thing for a lot of these movies. But I mean, I just thought with him, I was like, come on, man, you're talking about a character that has such rich material in regards to like the video games. and just even in the Paul W. S. Anderson movies, like even the Leon Kennedy and Paul W. S. Anderson movies, even though he was like written terribly, I could
He was
still
written terribly.
I could still kind of see Leon Kennedy there.
He had a little bit more of the Resident Evil 4 Leon. Like, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to think about it. If you look at Resident Evil 2, which is when Leon was introduced to the story, he was he was scared. It was his first day. He was a rookie cop, and he was scared when the outbreak happened. But he still rose to the occasion and still proved himself to be kind of a badass.
Mm-hmm.
This Leon was just kind of a bumbling idiot, to be honest. In this film,
Yeah.
there wasn't any.
Like you're missing like
Yeah,
the from
yeah, like
Halloween.
you're missing like the weird like crazy silly sound effects. I don't know. Like I think of the moment when the truck crashes and the zombie on fire walks in and just
And oh boy is
collapses,
listening to
and
like
he's sitting there asleep with those '90s headphones on. It's like, bro, those weren't noise canceling. Like you would hear that
mm-mm.
and feel that happening. You know, it felt very ingenuine with what they did with that character, and it kind of bothered me. So the idea that they're going to take my favorite entry in the entire franchise and possibly reboot it in a way that just doesn't.
Is this a reboot? Is that what we're getting at here, guys?
I mean, this would be technically, if this is true, this would be the first live action adaptation of Resident Evil 4 to date. They've never done a live act. They've taken elements of it. Obviously, Paul
Oh.
W.S. Anderson took elements of Resident Evil 4 and 5 and placed that into his films,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't a straight up adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we get into this, the article reads, the Resident Evil movie franchise is being rebooted yet again by Sony Pictures and Screen Gems. According to our trusted and proven sources, it's always a great day in paradise when you hear that, whatever that means. The
Yeah, yeah.
critically disdained but long-running series will be revived with a new movie based on Resident Evil 4, perhaps the most beloved of the entire video game series. Accordingly, this new movie will focus on the fan favorite character Leon S. Kennedy rather than Alice, which it needs to be, who has largely been the protagonist of the franchise up till now. Now, I find it very interesting that this is worded that way for a few different reasons. Number one, we're not going back to Paul W.S. Anderson's continuity. So, like, I don't understand why they even brought up Alice in that way. That doesn't even make any sense to me.
That wasn't
Like,
even like a thing to like compare it with now at this point, right?
yeah, like we're not going to take that same Leon. I don't even remember the guy's name who played him in Paul W. I think it was in Afterlife that he was in. It was Retribution or Afterlife. But we're not going to go back to that continuity. Like that's not going to happen. That logistically, people are going to be confused if you did that.
Yeah.
What would make sense would be for them to make this a direct sequel to Welcome to Raccoon City. But again, I don't think. I'm sorry. I know people will disagree with me, but as a Resident Evil fan, I personally don't feel that Welcome to Raccoon City was good enough to deserve a sequel. And I think that there's for a few reasons. Essentially, what Welcome to Raccoon City was for me was it's the same concept as if they tried to take when they did the live action adaptation of Harry Potter. It's like taking the first three games and being like, we're gonna condense, or the first three novels, being like, we're gonna condense that into one movie. That stuff didn't really contribute a whole lot to the main plot. We're just gonna, whatever. We're just gonna throw that into one film, and we're gonna really start at Order of the Phoenix, because that's where it really picks up and the story really begins. Like, no, that like you're building the world, like you're taking all the establishing plot points and just bagging it up into one tiny little thing, and then moving on to the stuff that you think really matters. That doesn't make any sense. And it's the same thing with Resident Evil. I don't think there's enough of a foundation there for you to do an adaptation of Resident Evil 4, because
It's
there
like
are
you haven't done any of the groundwork. You haven't laid anything
exactly
out
exactly
for the whole. In regards to like storytelling, I guess. Yeah, come on, guys. We know how to like. We all went through fucking like middle school English literature class. We know how to like how a story should go. You shouldn't
yes
jump into the meat and potatoes on the first page.
yes it it just seems like, I don't know. It seems like you said, like the groundwork is not there. The story has not been built up enough
Hmm.
to be doing a sequel to something. That was my biggest complaint with Welcome to Raccoon City. Was, both of you and I both agreed that the stuff at the mansion was great. That movie should have been just the mountains and the mansion.
Hmm.
That's it. When Alpha and Bravo team get chased into the mansion and the dogs are there and they find, the hive and all, like, that should have been the plot of that entire film. Because you could have done something really, really interesting, like the stuff when Chris is fighting zombies in the dark. That was all great. I really enjoyed that part. But the actual Raccoon City stuff was just so rushed and so, like, we're just gonna gloss over all of this information, then be like, and boom,
And
here's a sequel.
yeah.
Like, it didn't make sense to me. So I think jumping into, I don't know, jumping into a sequel in this way just seems very odd. It's not a very good creative choice to me.
It seems out of place, honestly, at this point.
I completely agree. Article goes on to say, Resident Evil 4 was released in 2005, originally on GameCube, but eventually ported to virtually every system, including the
Good
PlayStation
God, do you
2.
remember GameCube? I remember GameCube.
Yeah, man.
I was so jealous of Timothy who had the GameCube
Uh-huh.
at my neighbor's place.
Yeah. But including the PlayStation 2, PC, Wii, and various mobile platforms. I remember the mobile version of Resident Evil 4 too. That was pretty dope. It was an enormous commercial and critical hit for Capcom and the franchise, selling a colossal 11 million copies and being universally praised for its innovative gameplay, storytelling, and pretty much every aspect of the game. Almost 20 years later, it is still considered one of the greatest games ever made and a high watermark for the Resident Evil franchise, and is currently being remade. So it makes sense that Screen Gems would look to Resident Evil 4 to attempt to resurrect the film series, which has been floundering in recent years. There have been 7 films in the series so far, 6 of which starred Milla Jovovich as Alice. Many of the movies were directed by her spouse, Paul W.S. Anderson, who also frequently co-wrote and produced. While the movies were consistently poorly regarded by critics, they were also noted for their striking visuals, Jovovich-centered action, and essentially developing a storyline only loosely attached to the game series. But most importantly, the Resident Evil film series has been extremely successful at the box office, collectively grossing over $1.2 billion at the box office. That is less than a single Avatar movie these days, but with much lower budgets and a dedicated fan base. Sony Pictures no doubt wants to try to utilize the IP. Now, again, I'm going to pause here for a minute because yes, we're talking about Screen Gems, but this article is implying that we are going back to the Paul W.S. Anderson continuity,
Hmm.
which is just messy to me. Like, why would you do that? And I think about the way think about those sequels and the way that they took those sequels. Did they stay true to the game? No.
No.
Did it do its own thing? Yeah. But
But it did it so well, though. It turned into like an Elseworld kind of thing.
it did.
Where, like, I actually enjoyed this.
It did its own thing, and it was weird. And I do think that the first 2 films, Resident Evil and Resident Evil Apocalypse, were the best in the franchise. Honestly, if I had to rank them, that would be the easiest ranking in our channel's history, because literally they pretty much go in order that they came out in terms of how much I like each of them and how much I think they're a good film. But if you think about the ending, and it's been a while since I watched the final chapter, but
Oh, dude, I have no idea how that final chapter. Oh, wait, I think I do.
it doesn't make sense that you're going to do a sequel to that,
Mhm.
unless you set it within the world. But even if you set it within that world, Extinction is the 3rd film. I mean, the apocalypse essentially happened in the 3rd film. So, like, what's your continuity? That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like Resident Evil has such potential to be like a horror cinematic universe. And I know people are sick of hearing the cinematic universe thing, but Resident Evil could do that and do it really, really well, just as much as any comic book universe or anything like that. Like, the story is there and the lore is there. It's just that it's never been utilized properly in order to make it shine on the big screen. And obviously, I mean, look at what they're doing with The Last of Us. Yes, you're going to have to cut things out that were in the game. That's a given. But it just felt like Welcome to Raccoon City just kind of glossed over everything. There's never a good medium. Like, you have this new Resident Evil TV series, which I still haven't even watched, by the way. just
It's
saying.
not worth it.
I know.
Honestly.
That's what I've heard. I talked to a couple other Resident Evil people, like on Facebook and things like that, and they were like, "Don't. It's not even worth your time. Like, it's awful." So I'm not in a rush. I will watch it at some point. But you have that series, which did a continuation of the games, but it's not the current continuation of the game. Like, I don't know. Like, who? I don't know. Doesn't even make any sense. Then you have Welcome to Raccoon City, which is supposed to be a reboot, like a retelling on the big screen of the original first 3 games. But that's a lot. That's too much story to pack into an hour and 40 minutes in a film. It's just too much. You can't do it. And then you have the Paul W.S. Anderson stuff, which is its own reimagining of the story. So it's like there's just not, as you said at the beginning of this video, the groundwork is not there in order to properly tell the Resident Evil 4 story, because again, it's like trying to jump immediately into Order of the Phoenix without establishing like the wizarding world first. Like, you can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm not really feeling this, if this is really true.
I'd be interested to see how they do it. Honestly, at this point, like anytime a Resident Evil title comes in, I'm always willing to check it out. And that's not to say that's not to don't harp on me if I like shit on the TV series, because it honestly probably it's not that good. At least for me, it wasn't. So that being said, I'd be willing to give this one a shot. I mean, still, like, I enjoyed Welcome to Raccoon City for what it was. I mean, it was still fun. I'll be honest, and the zombies were so cool, and the clickers were so dope as fuck. And there's still a lot of good elements in that movie that I enjoyed. But I think that if you were to sit there and say like this was the only Resident Evil movie out there, I probably would want something else. I'll be honest.
Me too. And I'm down. Like, if they wanted to take the time to build the proper story, I'm 100% down to see what they do with it. But it just seems odd to me. Article goes on to say the 7th and most recent entry in the Resident Evil movie franchise was a hard reboot, jettisoning Milla Jovovich, Paul W.S. Anderson, and their accumulated lore with an eye to starting a new series. Boy, I cannot speak. Again, running on 2 hours of sleep. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City starred Hannah John Kamen, and Kaya Scodelario. Why, man? Listen, I'll tell you what. When they cast this new Resident Evil movie, I feel like they chose people with names that you can't pronounce, like, on purpose. Like, I remember doing that. Like, I was looking at we were doing a live show, I think, talking about it when they first announced it, and I was like, who are these people? Like, I do know Kaya Scodelario, I think it's how you say her name. She's a cool actress. I like her a lot. Anyways, and grossed $42 million at the box office against a budget of $25 million, so it did not exactly flop, but it is not great either. The film largely followed the plot of the first 2 games, so there is certainly room for this next movie to take things to the 4th game's plot. But again, what continuity are they saying this is with? Because they're kind of contradicting themselves here. Is it with the Welcome to Raccoon City continuity? Because it's different than the Paul W.S. Anderson continuity. Those are 2 very different things. So I'm kind of curious of what are they doing? Aside from the upcoming Resident Evil 4 based movie, there's also a CGI animation film featuring Leon Kennedy coming out soon. So it looks like the franchise is looking to pivot to focus on him over Alice, Jill Valentine, or Claire Redfield. Leon Kennedy already appeared in Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, played by Ivan Josia, so it seems possible in this new movie will be a direct continuation of that continuity. Hopefully, it will do better than the recently canceled Netflix series. My God, we can only hope.
Yeah. I'll be honest, the CGI animation films
they're good.
Resident Evils are so freaking good.
They're good.
And they're so over the top too. So I mean, like, I know what I'm getting at with that. Honestly, even though if I'm not like getting like a retelling, it would be dope to have a CGI animation of like Welcome to Raccoon City.
Yeah.
But but unfortunately, they're doing like other stories, which I'm completely okay with. I don't remember what that last one was. What was the most recent one? It was primarily surrounded around
Damnation.
Leon.
Was it
It was
Damnation?
surrounding Leon and Chris.
I think it was Damnation.
Was it Damnation? I don't know. There was a really dope scene in there.
No.
I just remember.
I forget which ones there are. Vendetta. That's what it was. It was
That's
Vendetta.
what it
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
Vendetta.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember Degeneration was sick. I loved Degeneration a lot. I
Hmm.
enjoyed Damnation. I think I saw Vendetta. I think I saw it once. And then Death Island is the new one coming out. But yeah, their animated stuff has always slapped. They're kind of like DC in that way, where a lot of times their live action stuff is really really iffy, but their animated stuff and their video games are like 11 out of 10, like really
Oh
really
yeah,
well done stories. So I listen, I'm not opposed to a live action adaptation of Resident Evil 4. Again, I have such a love for that story and for that game, but as a part
but
of this continuity,
yeah,
no. I still think that the best possible thing that could happen for Resident Evil is for HBO or for some, which I know the whole licensing thing, that would be a lot. But I think the best thing for Resident Evil would be to completely start it over and tell individual stories. Do something like, I think there was an idea a long time ago. Somebody had an idea for a prequel series where it's like murders are happening in the Arklay Mountains, which they would have no idea is people turning into zombies and eating other people.
hmm,
And there's a detective out there trying to investigate things and whatever else, and like you could do that. Then you could do a film that actually tells the Mansion story about Alpha Team and Bravo Team. Like there I feel like there's a way to tell this story that honors it instead of just trying to gloss things over to get to the part that everybody wants. Like the part that everybody wants doesn't matter if you gloss over the lore. And
exactly.
it just, I don't know, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. But listen, comment down below, let us know your thoughts. Would you like to see a sequel to Welcome to Raccoon City that is a direct adaptation of Resident Evil 4? For me, I'm kind of not really about it if they're going to do a continuation of either one of those continuities. So, guys, let us know your thoughts. We do new shows every single week at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at LTM Podcast KY. Be good to each other. Have an awesome rest of your night, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.